All right, so today we're diving into a debate between Andrew Wilson and a panel guest named Kiko, and this one's about war victims. Now, you'd think this would be pretty straightforward, like who dies in war more? Pretty measurable question, right? But no, this turns into a full-blown philosophy class taught by someone who skipped math and logic both. So buckle up, because Andrew's out here dealing with arguments that are allergic to definitions.
On this one, Kiko, men are the primary victims of war, to which you disagree. Why? Also, Maria, you also disagreed with that.
I mean, if you're saying victims of war, as in like, yes, they're the ones who are picked to go out and fight war, sure. But if you're talking about like where soldiers are sent and where the war is actually being taken place, I think equal parts are equal victims. I think everyone is equally a victim of war.
Man, right off the bat, you can tell we're in for a long night. The logic's moving in slow motion here. She hears primary victims of war and immediately turns it into everyone's a victim. That's like answering who won the race with we all took part. Look, empathy's great, but empathy isn't evidence. The word primary means scale, degree, numbers, and when 90% of battlefield deaths are men, it's not a feeling, it's math. Saying everyone's equally a victim is like looking at a burning building and saying, well, everyone's affected by the fire. Sure, but one group's in the flames, the other's watching the smoke. How are they the same?
From our country sent men over to different countries, and that sometimes the actions that they did to the women and children in those countries were not okay. So that's why I think both genders were affected equally.
Let me ask you a question. So I agree that trauma can be debilitating. PTSD, things like this, can be brutal on a person. But do you agree with me that you can heal from traumas?
Yes, you can heal from traumas, but it depends.
Can I ask you, can you heal from a trauma if you're dead?
No, but it's the same thing.
No.
She's not in frame enough.
But sorry, me?
Yeah,
turn your phone the opposite way, please. I know you're waiting on your thing.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I get that sentiment. That's why I'd say like when they were picking random numbers for different men to go to the war and all that. So I'm not saying it's not like if you're picking the country that are sending the men to go to war, the men from that country are more affected. But then if you're discussing the women that are affected in the country that we're fighting against,
there's still going to be men in those countries too.
But they died being assaulted, so it's the same thing. They died in war. They died being assaulted.
They don't usually die being assaulted.
But they did.
Some, but overwhelmingly.
And some men died too.
Well, a lot more men die than women do in war. Significantly higher numbers. And my question
because statistically, we only look, when we do statistics, we look at the men that we sent to war and we document how many came back. We don't document how many women we killed while we were in those countries.
In fact,
That's not incorrect.
Yeah, it is. In fact, we overwhelmingly do it. So, for instance, you could take.
But it's usually accurate.
Nope, it's actually quite accurate.
Andrew, we have no way of statistically proving how many women we hurt because we don't document it. They are killing these women and throwing them in the bushes.
And children.
They're not being counted for. They're not being accounted for. But every man who didn't make it back home was accounted for.
Every human
That's the
being,
difference.
Roughly, not all, right? But almost every human being who died in the Hiroshima and Nagasaki blast were accounted for.
No, because they're still dying to this day from the chemicals that they're consuming.
They're not.
They are.
They're not.
Okay, quick correction. Nobody is still dying from the Hiroshima and Nagasaki blasts. The bombings happened in 1945. The survivors, called hibakusha, suffered long-term radiation effects, yes, cancers, birth defects, but those effects peaked decades ago. There aren't people still dying today from the original radiation exposure. That's just false. Now, here's what just happened. She claimed women weren't documented, yet somehow concluded that more women were killed or affected than men. Wait, if they weren't counted, how's she even making that claim? That's literally arguing from thin air. And look, assault and dying on the battlefield aren't remotely comparable. One is trauma, the other ends your life. When we talk about primary victims of war, it's about who dies, and historically, it's overwhelmingly men. In World War II alone, over 25 million male soldiers died in uniform. Civilians suffered too, of course, but proportionally, men make up the vast majority of fatalities. And no, the women in the bushes weren't forgotten. The Red Cross, the UN, National Archives, they've been documenting war casualties since the 1800s. The data exists.
Dying from the Hiroshima and Nagasaki blast. The radiation's been gone for years and years and years and years and years. But this aside, if you talk about like the Japanese invading Nanking, for instance, we have a pretty good idea of the death count there for men and women both. We don't, you could make the argument, I suppose, we don't know the entirety of the SA count. I would agree with that, right? That's a much harder thing to track. But they're still alive, meaning they can still at least heal from that.
We know of. We don't, just because you can't.
No. We can take an accounting for, Stacy was here yesterday.
You can't account
now
all the women that are
Stacy's not here.
You can't account all the women that were forever maimed from those things. If we can't even count the ones that were SA'd, we don't
Okay.
count. We don't count all the women and children or even other men, because I'm sure there was also men who were victims of those things.
Sure.
We don't account for them,
But can they heal from those things?
but I'm saying we don't account for all the ones just because you're saying, oh, they were just SA'd. No, we don't know which women were killed or not. We know
which women were killed. Yes, we do.
We don't.
Yes, we do.
We don't.
Why do you think?
We don't.
Why do you think in
our
modern
own history, any country, even other countries, will never admit how many people they hurt for us. It's the same thing.
Why do you think
they will never?
But
ever.
even if we just had estimates, even if we were just going off of estimates, we didn't have the exact clear picture. We were just going off of estimates.
We have no clue how many women were there before we touched down versus after.
If we were to assume, for instance, in Germany, that let's just say, right, these are wildly inaccurate numbers, but they're fine to demonstrate. Let's just say that 100,000 soldiers in Germany died. Okay, 100,000, and 500,000 women in Germany were SA'd, and only like 30,000 died. Okay, it's horrible that 30,000 women died,
and
but the ones who were SA'd, do you at least agree with me that there is a potential for them to get past that trauma of the SA, whereas for the dead soldier, that does not exist?
Actually, that's not what I'm arguing with you against. I agree with that, but I'm just saying the numbers do not constitute accurately the amount of dead soldiers versus women or children affected by it.
They do, though.
No, because we count we count every single man who doesn't make it back home. We don't count every man that they touched in those countries. We have no clue what the fuck they were doing.
European nations.
If you think that those men, what do you think they're doing? They're coming home from war and saying, yeah, I SA'd this woman in this tribe and this child in this tribe. No, they're not coming home and saying those things. We have no clue what the hell they were doing.
Do you realize that many nations, right, for 200 years have been taking a consensus?
And the consensus?
I'm sorry, a census, not a consensus.
And the census never asked me if I was assaulted.
They
asked me my race.
But did they count if you were alive?
But that's not the point.
Answer my question, Kiko.
But a dead person can't.
Can I come to your door, Kiko, and count you on the census if you're dead?
Do you think Afghanistan is doing a census? I don't know.
Okay, so we're.
Oh my God, here we go. You don't need a perfect census in every country to know how many people die in war. That's why we have global databases, the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, for example. We don't need to ask every Afghan personally. We have estimates based on verified conflict reports, NGO field data, and satellite evidence. It's like saying you can't measure the ocean because you didn't count every drop.
You think Afghanistan's doing an accurate
census? If you won't answer a single question...
That's my answer.
Okay, so let's back up. When somebody goes, if the census goes, right, and they count Kiko on the census, does Kiko need to be alive to be counted?
Yes.
Okay, so if they go the next year and Kiko is not alive, can they count Kiko?
No.
Okay, well then we can pretty accurately determine the numbers of how many women and men, die, including in war, because they still take a census.
But not those foreign countries.
Which ones? We had European wars. What do you mean?
I'm not talking about those ones.
Which ones?
You said about war being affected, and even if those European wars, you're talking about census, because I already answered your question. Do I believe that if you are still alive? That's not what I'm arguing anymore. If you want to keep going on that, that's your whole overarching point. We can end the conversation because I already agreed with you that they have
then
the
men
opportunity.
have to be the primary victims.
No.
Well, then that makes no sense.
That's what you just. A victim doesn't have to be dead. You don't have to be dead to be a victim.
But
that's never been a
we're not
classification of
asking if
victim.
these people aren't victims.
That's what he asked. It was a victim of war.
No, he didn't. He
Yeah,
said who's the
read the question.
primary victim.
And you don't, to be a primary victim doesn't mean you have to be dead. We're all still victims, and I said there's
but
no
nobody's
primary.
disputing that.
We're all equally. Men lose their lives by being forced to fight these wars, and women and children lose their lives from the men who go and complete those wars,
Yeah.
and maybe even the men in their own country taking advantage of the times that they're in.
Okay.
That was my whole point.
Kiko,
That's a
if
different question.
A meteorite blasted through the ceiling and killed you right now, and all of us in this room had to see it. Who was the primary victim of the meteorite?
Everyone who was in the line of the meteoroid. There's no. It's not. We're not gonna. I'm not gonna count from a
We're
meteoroid
all
if
alive.
you're a man or a woman.
We're all alive. None of us got hurt. We just had to watch that happen, which is horrible, but we did see it
There's
happen.
no man or woman answer in there. It depends on
I'm
the
not
county
asking
number.
about a man or a woman, so here, very specific to my question. Meteorite crashes through the ceiling, hits you in the head, explodes your head. You're dead instantly, and all of us have to watch it. The meteor didn't hit us, it hit you, okay? Everybody in this room is definitely affected by that. Who would you say was the primary victim of the meteorite?
I would be the primary victim.
You would be the primary
Yeah.
victim. Why? Because the people around us, around you, even though we could be traumatized by that, could potentially heal. You, on the other hand, could never heal, right?
But if I'm okay, so with your same analogy, meteoroid comes down, hits me, explodes my head, and then I go and all of you guys, you're victims now too. You're still primary victims because that meteoroid that came down was a whole. It's still, no matter who is on site, you all are victims.
I have no idea what you
meteor
just said.
shrapnel, like more than one.
Like if
you were the only one that died, but other people.
No,
were
I'm not saying that. I'm saying because I'm not, maybe not the exact analogy he was using, but he said if I got hit by a meteoroid, right?
Like
Yeah.
you died, but other
No,
people.
but I'm alive. The meteoroid comes down, hits me in the head,
Yep.
but I'm still alive with the meteoroid in my head. Nobody got hit, and I go around and fuck all you up. You are still victims of that meteoroid because I would have never done that if the meteoroid didn't exist.
Completely agree. Who would the primary victim of it be, though?
That's not the fucking question.
That is. Do you want me to read the question?
That's not the point of the
Well,
question.
what if
Brian,
you-
what does the question say?
What's the point of the question?
It
what's the
asks.
point of the
It asks
question?
who are the primary. Okay, so this is number 14.
So you're talking about primary. You're talking about
Men
initial.
are the primary victims of war.
So you're saying they're the first victim.
No, they're
What
the.
if you died?
Are you talking about
No.
primary as first? Because the example you used,
No,
all I
no.
was
No,
using
no,
for
no, hang on,
primary
I'll explain
because
it.
I was the first person who was hit, and then I affected everybody else. So you're saying that men are primary because they're the first ones who were
No, not
infected,
because they're the
and then what
first.
they went through
No,
was
Kiko, you're
causality on everybody else. That doesn't make a difference.
No,
it doesn't.
The word primary is main.
Okay, so if I was the main person who was hit, and I fucked everybody else up because I was hit,
Then you would be the main victim.
but they were still victims of the war. They're still primary victims of the
Nobody
war.
said they're not victims.
You know
We're
that's
asking
not
who's the
point.
main victim.
Andrew,
Can I add
you know
something?
absolutely that that's not the point.
It is the point.
It's not,
What-
and everyone here can see
I
that
wanna-
that's
So
Can
you
I-
not the
think
point.
you think that men?
What?
The reason that this is actually phrased this way, men are the primary victims of war, is to make sure that it's noted that
Okay.
all people can be victims of war.
Yeah, I'm done. That debate went nowhere. Just noise, no logic. Andrew was way too patient. I'd have checked out long before that. Anyway, if you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. And I'll see you in the next one.